Hello and welcome to Chapter 7 of our book. This is SBS 101 Introduction to Anthropology, and I am Juan Jose Gutierrez, your instructor for this semester. So I'd like to go over with you some of the main concepts that are presented in Chapter 7 of our book, and it talks about primates, which is our closest relatives in the animal kingdom, and for that matter, in the entire living planet that we live in. Let's start exploring some of the main ideas. Why do an anthropologist or anthropologists would study primates? It's a great way to understand where we come from and why we are the way we are. Those are the big questions that an anthropologist would ask from the physical perspective. And so understanding primates as our closest relatives in on Earth, it's just a sound idea, and that's why it's been studied. Um, there are many things that are of great interest. It's important to understand the behavioral characteristics as they share many things with us, and it's also important to understand their evolution because we have at least part of the time we share the same ancestors. So and for that matter, it's important to have a sense of the chronology of their presence in Earth. The one thing that I want to address right from the get-go is this idea that was present in the 19th century when Darwin was first advancing his understanding of human evolution. He was attacked by many saying, "I don't come from a monkey. The monkey might be your grandpa, but it's not my grandpa." Well, that's an utter this misunderstanding and lack of understanding and lack of knowledge as to how evolution works and our evolutionary history. We don't come from monkeys, rest assured. We don't come from big apes, but we do share common ancestry with them, and that is the reason that we have and share many traits with them that are important to understand. So some of the questions that we will address is how are we similar and different from monkeys and apes, and what is the meaning of us sharing some of the characteristics with these animals? So let's explore that. Let's start with a blanket definition of primatology. Primatology is the study of non-human primates, but it is both present and living primates and the fossil record of prior iterations of these animals on planet Earth. So that's primatology. Primatology's main interest from the human perspective is to understand what is our relationship with these animals and what are the things that we share in terms of anatomy, brain structure, genetics, and biochemistry with these animals. We have homologies, which is similarities with those organisms, and part of what primatology does is to address and assess what is the relevance of such similarities, right? There are similarities that are visible, like we have um, binocular vision. We use two eyes and we have depth of perception. Think of a horse or other types of mammals that actually have their eyes on the sides of the head. Our eyes are in front. That is not just a simple coincidence. It means that we evolve the eyes that we have for certain reasons and in certain contexts. And one of the things that result from that is the fact that we have binocular vision, 3D vision, in other words. We can see and interpret depth, and that's critical for us in terms of handling our environment. But it is also to other primates, and that's what makes it so interesting. There are other structural and biochemical homologies that are not as visible as the eyes, but that are there that are important to understand. So we have reason to suspect, and good reason, that we have early common ancestors with those animals. Here's a map of the family. So we are all primates, all these animals that are here. And excuse me if I'm calling us animals, but we might be special, but we're still animals as part of that kingdom. We're not plants, right? So this is the way that taxonomists, that is, those that are interested in understanding the organization of life in the planet, have organized primates. So we have prosimians, which is one branch that we don't belong to, and then anthropoids, which actually the name comes from the fact that they are closer to us. Anthropoids are divided into two types. Those with certain types of noses, that's platyrrhines, and then catarrhines, which is another type of nose. One is prominent and one is flat. And it's just in the case of the New World monkeys, they tend to have flat noses, whereas the Old World monkeys tend to have pointed or sharp noses. So, and they do make sharp noises too, but that's another topic. So, in terms of our closest cousins, if you like, and relatives, well, they're apes. You can say that. In terms of proximity, genetic proximity, those are the animals that we're closer related to. And all of these are the closest of all, and that's what we call them primates. Comes from primus, which is the first, that is the closest. I bet you're by now really interested in this topic. So let me first of all sort of remind you how is it that taxonomists organize the entire definition of life and different types of life in the planet. They have a very careful excuse me, careful system of organization of different characteristics of animals that goes from kingdom, the animal kingdom, and that's one of the three kingdoms that are there, and then all other these characteristics all the way to species and subspecies. Those are the first, the main elements of taxonomic arrangement. So let me show you how that looks when we look at primates. All right, so here we are. We are Homo sapiens sapiens. All of us, regardless of where you live in the planet, and all of us actually come from a species that it's broader than what we are. That is the Homo sapiens. So what other Homo sapiens is there? Well, there's no longer here, but Neanderthals were Homo sapiens as well. So all of us in evolutionary terms are recent humans. Homo sapiens Neanderthal disappeared some 30, 50,000 years ago. But before we had them as our brothers of the same species, although different subspecies. Then we're all humans. That's a genus. And then hominins and hominids. I want you to pay attention to these two words, hominids and hominins, because this is the way in which you sort of start being more specific about in terms of referring to humans. Look at this. This is a catarrhines, which is one type of classification based on the shape of the nose. And then we keep going up, but we're primates, but we're also part of the larger group that is called Eutheria, which has to do with how the babies are forming in the mother's placenta. Then mammals, because we all lactate at an early age as a way to gain maturity. We're all vertebrates, chordates, and we're all animals. So as you go deeper and deeper into this classification, you get more specific till you get to your own species. That's what we say, you get more specific, because we go from kingdom, which is the most general, to the more specific. What's the species, right? All right. Let's talk about homologies and analogies. So, homologies is things that we have in common with other animals that actually are suspected to come from a long-standing history of evolution. An analogy is a similar trait that are in species that are similar, but it comes from selective forces that are actually pressing those animals to evolve in similar ways. But the homology is the one that we actually share because we have that common ancestry, not just because we happen to have solved certain evolutionary pressure in a similar way. That's the difference. That's the difference between homology and analogy. So, in terms of understanding our more specific branch where we belong into, hominids are that's a family that we belong to, and but it includes not just living organisms, but organisms that were here long before we were here. So it's fossil. That is, the fossil record talks about those ancient livings organisms, and then living humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, and other ancestors. All of those are part of the group, the large group that is called the hominid. But there's another tribe or subtribe that is the hominini, which describes human species. That is, those are directly related to who we are today. And that excludes chimps and gorillas. As I was saying, we don't come from the monkey. We have a common ancestry, but we are different branches. And I'll show you a graphic to that effect. Now, let's see. I'm going to skip the primate taxonomy. I want you to go ahead and take a look at it in your book. But here's the graphic that I was referring to. Here we are, the human, and we're really kind of closely placed with gorillas and chimpanzees. This again doesn't mean that this is my grandpa and this is my grandma. It basically means that we all have a common ancestor, and that happened actually. If you look at this this rule over here, that gives you a sense of the millions of years. So 10 to 12 million years ago, there was an organism, a primate, that actually branched out into 3 different species altogether, if not more. But certainly more. But in any event, that's a relationship. That's grandpa right there, not here and not here. We are also closely related to the orangutan, but as you can see, that goes further back in time. Same goes with the gibbon. All of these are great apes, by the way. So, or hominoids, which makes a very important group. I'm really happy and relieved that I'm not as closely related to baboons as I am to orangutans, because baboons are kind of a nasty little creature, and the common ancestry goes way back to probably close to 40 million years ago. That's a long evolutionary time already. And there's 2 types of monkeys, and the New World monkeys and Old World monkeys. See, the common ancestor can really needs to be traced way back in time, and probably some 50 some million years ago. How do we know this? Well, the homology and the analogies of some of these animals is such that we can only suspect that there's a common ancestry. And when paleozoologists would be looking at the fossil record and whatnot, they will find those elements that are more and more similar till you find one individual in the fossil record that actually gives you the what's called the missing link. That is the link that ties these 2 species together, but that it also shows that they were separate. This has to do with larger forces, very important forces like separation of continents many million years ago, which explains and provides the context of isolation that can generate different species. And that was necessary for these distances to appear. And then you have the prosimians, which are the cutest of them all, and I wish we were related to these little monkeys, because some of them are extremely cute. But as you can see, we're far away from them. All of us, however, belong to the same group, that is the primates. and we have many things in common that should be and are explored in this chapter. So let's talk about those tendencies. All of the primates branched out because of different evolutionary pressures that had to do with changes in the environment and changes in the composition of the immediate context in which they were living. Um, many primates are arboreal, which leads to suspect that perhaps we were some of our ancestors, direct ancestors, were at a point in time arboreal. We have certain elements that can actually come from that common past or arboreal past. Our grasping ability comes from that. That's a marvelously well adapted ability for living out in trees and in forests. Smell and sight, it's peculiar, as I was talking about the binocular sight. That has to do with the depth of perception is critically important when you're jumping from one branch to the other. Those with binocular vision are probably going to not fall from the tree, and so binocular vision in that sense becomes quite important. The perception of depth. But there are other things that are also fascinating. Is the parental investment. Unlike other animals, think of a cow. The calf is born and off it goes. That doesn't happen with most primates. There's a level of investment from the parents that it's higher here than in other species. And I'm going to give you a clue. It has to do with the size of the head and with the neural development of primates that soon start to be higher than in other animals. And then there are many things of sociality, that is how we relate to each other, that we can certainly see resemblances with other primates. All right, let's talk a little bit about anthropoids. Anthropoids are um, it's one of the two branches, if you remember that scheme that I just shown, and actually divided into other branches. The prosimians is not a part of the anthropoids. The prosimians are a distinct branch, and they actually ended up not competing with anthropoids for the same resources, as they developed the ability to actually make their most of their activity during the night. During the night, as opposed to the anthropoids that actually have their activity during the day. Okay, I'm kind of stumbling here, but bear with me. Right. Monkeys are anthropoids, and the monkeys are ones that we have certain interesting resemblances with. As I was showing in that scheme with the branching out, you have platyrrhines, which are mostly New World monkeys, and those are flat-nosed, and then catarrhines, which are sharp-nosed, and it's a characteristics that clearly differentiates monkeys from the New and the Old World, and it has to do certainly with environmental conditions. All the New World monkeys and many of the Old World monkeys are arboreal. As I'm indicating here, monkeys move differently from apes and humans. And if you're asking me what's the difference, well, it has to do with how they live in some of the abilities of the body that we just don't have exactly like them. They move their arms and legs parallel to each other's, and most monkeys actually have tails. We've lost the tail long ago. For New World monkeys, they live in the forests in Central and South America. They have prehensile or grasping tails, so they use the tail more for both balancing and for grasping. And then let me show you this image with the two types of nose structures. The This is the Platoride, which is the flat nose, and this is the Catarrhine, which is the sharper nose. And they seem closer to us than they. All right. Insofar as the old monkeys goes, the old world monkeys goes, they are both terrestrial and arboreal, and they do have significant distinctions with the old world monkeys. Uh, the one that I think is most interesting is the sexual dimorphism. Dimorphism means that there's a strike difference in sizes and shape when you compare gender, when you compare different sexes in the animals. Humans, for example, have an important degree of sexual dimorphism, meaning that male and female differ in size and in different characteristics. In the case of old world monkeys, males are significantly larger and fiercer than the terrestrial females. So those are interesting differences to review. And of course, the question that anthropologists and biologists ask is what is the relevance of this difference and what's the origin of this difference in terms of the size of the different species. More about apes. Apes are the closest to humans in terms of the primate kingdom. Mostly they are arboreal, or live in the forests and woodlands. And but some of them are actually also bound to live in the ground, like orangutans and gorillas and whatnot. But all of them have characteristics of having had an arboreal existence before. Of the apes, which is again the closest animal to our species, is you have gibbons as the smallest of this group, but they mostly live in the top of the forest and in the canopy, which is an amazing place. It's a whole ecosystem that is up there, and you can find in the, I don't know if you heard much of how the canopy environment and niche ecological niche works, but it's a world in and of itself. So these animals live there, and but they do have lots of behavioral adaptations that are closer to us, and in that sense they certainly have and deserve our attention. And I'm gonna leave you with this image too. That says the ratio of limbs when you compare a gibbon and a human being, and just look at the size of the arm compared to the length of the body. Whereas for humans, you have the length of the legs. It's much higher, and actually the shape of the legs and whatnot. This is actually meant for walking, and whereas this is meant for grasping and flying from branch to branch. So those are certainly adaptations that are studied and makes us different. But the basic structure of the animal is going to be very similar in terms of where the head, the arms, and the thorax and everything is located. So we have commonalities and striking differences as well. All right. So orangutans is the other closest or closer species to ours, and that it's quite fascinating and interesting. Okay, I think I'm gonna leave you with this cute image of an orangutan, and I look forward to your comments on the nano gong, on things that you've heard in this presentation. Many of which I'm hoping that you were familiar with, but let's think of this as a nice recap on issues that pertain to understanding who we are in the context of life in the planet. All right, see you soon.